Well, today is the first day of Sukkot, right? First part of Sukkot. It lasts for 7 days, and we will be talking about the concepts of Sukkot, its meaning, its depth. We will reflect back over the year. We'll talk about the year to come. And when we meet again this week, we're going to have a special time of sharing and lunch together. We're just going to have a great time of community and fellowship. So make sure that you come with your mind thinking about what has your journey meant to you this year, and what has happened to your family and to your life, and how has things changed. And so it's a day of inspiration, because Sukkot is about joy, is it not? So this is about joy. So I would like to take this time this evening to first talk about the general purpose of Sukkot. What is it? What does it mean? And we're going to talk about a little bit sort of a higher level of understanding of Sukkot, its spiritual significance, and what it actually is all about. And the reason why that it's important for us to understand Sukkot is, according to Zechariah, the 14th chapter, when the millennial period begins and Messianic kingdom is set up, all the nations will have representatives, or it says, will come to Jerusalem for Sukkot. That is something that boggles my mind. You can't even get the rest of the Jews that live in the United States to go to Jerusalem for Sukkot, much less the whole world. But when the king is in charge, everybody says yes, sir. Right? So it's going to be different. So let's talk about Sukkot for a little bit. Let's talk about its significance. You guys help me for a moment. We're going to do a little test. Skip, you're up first. No, I'm just picking. The first thing, Sukkot. What does Sukkot mean? What does it mean? Does anybody know what Sukkot means? Not the coat, Sukkot. What does it mean? Okay? Shelters, dwelling, means dwelling. We have this idea that we dwell in the presence of God, that our relationship is a relationship of dwelling. Now let me ask you, what is the difference between dwelling and loitering? Loiterer is someone who's someplace that they should not be.
Right.
A dweller, it has ownership. In the kingdom of heaven, there is no loitering. There is no loiterers. Either you belong or you don't belong. There's a lot of people that hang around the front of the store, if you know what I mean, and they don't own the store. And that's why they have signs, no loitering in front of the store. Why? Because people want to hang out in front, drink 40 ounces, laugh and joke and smoke. They don't own the place. That's called loitering. Well, whenever one pretends that they belong, but they do not have ownership in something, it's considered loitering. And Sukkot is not an act of loitering. Sukkot is an act of belonging. It's an act of ownership. All through this year, you and your family have gone through careful consideration in your relationship with Hashem. I mean, very careful consideration in many aspects of your life. We've all thought about what we can do to sort of raise the bar, raise our own personal expectation. What are we actually looking to achieve? I mentioned this earlier in a conversation with someone. We were talking about how important it is for us to do what our purpose is in life. And I know there are individuals who will spend their entire life looking for that elusive thing, never achieve it, because it's out there, but they don't know what it is. And they spend their whole life almost in a psychological place of what do you call a frozen place of life, just absolutely frozen, because they're looking for something they don't know what they're looking for. And so they never really accomplish what they should be doing at the time. It's like the person who wants to be the entrepreneur. Come on in, welcome. It's like the person who's attempting to be the entrepreneur. We all think of ourselves as wanting to do something a little extra in life and want to be an entrepreneur. But how much is an entrepreneur, how much salt is he worth in life if he never actually starts entrepreneuring something he's already good at? Right? So many times, Viktor Frankl had a book, and it was actually quoted today by a young man, which I was surprised that he quoted it, because I didn't think people read books anymore. But anyway, he quoted a book about, he said, Viktor Frankl had talked about how there are times in your life that you have to, you just have to grasp the moment. Just grasp the moment and do what you're supposed to do at that moment. Now, Viktor Frankl is a Holocaust survivor and a very famous therapist. And he talked about how life sort of happens, and sometimes you just have to respond to what happens in life. Now, you can spend your entire existence during a very difficult time of your life wishing that your life was not that way, right? Wishing that it would all just go away. Maybe if I could have this set of circumstances, I could be able to accomplish this. So since I don't have this set of circumstances, I guess I can't accomplish this. What Viktor Frankl says is, in spite of your circumstances, grab a hold of what you can do. And so the whole idea of Sukkot is that we grab a hold of our ownership in our relationship with God. Sukkot is about dwelling with God and God dwelling with us. Now, it is prophetically looking to a period of time in which we know that the very Shekinah of Hashem will dwell in this physical space. Correct?
Right.
Now, do we believe that at some level divine inspiration does exist in this physical reality? Yes, absolutely we do. But what's missing? What's missing? The full manifestation of God's presence.
Yeah.
The full manifestation.
Right.
And the reason why the full manifestation cannot come into this space, no one is capable of processing it. I remember a friend of my wife and I's one time showed up and we saw him. Looked like he had went to Galveston to the beach. I was like, wow, you got some sun this weekend. He goes, no, it was work. You're an electrician. When you worked outside? He goes, no, not at all. He says, I left for lunch and I put a marker on the panel, and he was working in a big commercial, you know, the big help me here, guys. 220, something like that. The big
480.
Yeah, 480, whatever. With the big ones. And he had turned the breaker off and told him, don't touch it and he'll be back. Well, when he came back, they had turned the breaker on and the sign was still on there. And so he came in and opened the panel up and stuck a screwdriver in, and it exploded. Right? It's a lot of power. I mean, it sunburned him. It was so...
Lucky he's alive.
Oh, no, he's absolutely lucky he's alive. And he had one of those heavy-duty screwdrivers with the rubber handle, and he had gloves, only thing that saved his life, basically. But, you know, he said his hearing rang for hours after. I mean, it was pretty intense. You know, we understand that the divine essence of Hashem, whenever it pierces into the physical reality, will evaporate anything that cannot handle the load.
Right.
Evil will cease to exist. It will evaporate. The only ones that are going to be able to handle the load are the ones who have conditioned themselves to Torah, those who have conditioned themselves in their connection with God, at whatever level. And that's what the whole final redemption is about. Because he ends up, in the end, bringing about complete transformation of all of mankind. And he brings us up to the place in which we can handle the connection. It's like knowing that you are capable of handling a certain load. We've all had children that has put hairpins in sockets. And they only do that like once, maybe twice.
Right.
Depends on our children. I had one that did it twice. But the whole point is it only takes a couple of times of plugging that into the wall until you realize it's more powerful than you are. And I do find it a bit hilarious that there are people within certain religious mindsets that think they have Hashem all figured out. And we're not saying that we have him figured out. What we are saying is that the Torah, the Tanakh, has given us an amazing place to settle in. An amazing place to dwell in a relationship with God in which our neshama, our soul, connects to God. And it's like a comfortable place. It's a place that most of us have searched for our entire life. Have we not?
Yes.
Our entire life of going through different levels of religious study, of spiritual experiences, dabbling in all types of level of mysticism, we finally found this great pearl of great prize. And we're willing to give everything that we have away in the material world to obtain this wonderful treasure. What a great place to be in. Here at Sukkot, as a community, we come together and we'll start the celebration with family and friends. Hopefully some of you will make a makeshift sukkah at your house and you will have your meals out. I'm actually thinking about camping out tonight in the backyard in my new hammock, so we'll see how that works. If I show up with bent neck tomorrow, you'll know what it is. But it's about a physical display of something that we've already been doing for a long time, and that is dwelling with God. All of the study that is obtainable, all the words in every book that is written, is just simple intellectual knowledge if there isn't a soul connection with God, if you're not dwelling. There are a lot of people who can make great theological arguments about all levels of ideas. But you and I both know that theological arguments does not necessarily make one connected to God. And for those of us who have journeyed through this year, we've come to Sukkot, and some it might still be a bit of a mystery. And so that's why tonight is important for us to talk about some of the things that you can do for Sukkot in the physical that will help you connect in the spiritual. I said this 2 weeks ago. Let me re-emphasize it and then explain to you why Sukkot is so important for you. I said that if we cannot grasp God in the mundane and the simple foundational or rudimentary moedims, or periods of times of celebrations of his feast, to include Sabbath, if we don't understand him at that very simple level, forget about any higher level. Just forget about it. It doesn't mean you don't have a relationship with God, okay?
Right.
It just means that obtaining higher knowledge of Hashem is going to be, to obtain higher knowledge of God, first must begin with understanding the basics of the moedim, the appointed times that God has for his people. How can I understand discernment if I'm not careful what I eat? How can I understand the importance of connecting to God if I don't have one day a week in which that day is the day that God has appointed for me to connect to him, right? So, Sukkot, so important because this is about celebrating first at the simplest level Israel's exodus from Egypt, right? It was there at that place in their life that they were the closest to Hashem. Now, we all look in hindsight at all the goofy things that they did. We looked at all of the rebellious things that happened. We looked at all the complaining and the mealy-mouth behavior that took place, right? But at the same time, this was the time that God called Israel his son. This is when he waltzed with them in the desert. There was this incredible relationship, and you would think, people at this level, they had nothing. All they had were the clothes on their backs and the shoes on their feet. They lived in shelters. They lived in makeshift homes. They didn't have brick and mortar houses. But they were the closest with God. Why were they the closest with God? Because every day they depended on Him for their warmth, for their heat if it's cold, for their food in the morning. Every meal had to be supplied to them. They were like infants on life support. And the reason why that God's people are supposed to celebrate Sukkot every year, it's a reminder that the ultimate place that we should be is completely 100% dependent upon Him. Now, we all live in a very independent culture in this country, right? We might be changing that a little bit, but most of us still live very independent of the government or anybody else. Especially in Texas, we're fiercely independent people. We don't need anybody's help. But to have a legitimate relationship with God, it means that we must depend on Him. First and foremost, for the safekeeping of our soul. Second is for the final redemption. And then that in between, the keeping of our soul and final redemption, is about us dwelling with God. It's about us connecting with God and realizing that if I am going to be like those who are the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, then my entire existence in the physical world has to be an existence in which my every conscious move is dependent on what Hashem wants. That's what Sukkot is about. If you think it's just about 4 kinds of species and building a cabin in the backyard and eating your meals in it, you've missed the whole thing. And those are good. But once again, if I don't understand the physical at its most basic rudimentary, how can I understand the highest level? At the most basic level, what is this about? It's about us taking a physical sukkah, a little 3-sided hut, what do you want to call it, with a roof that you can see through it, with branches that are laid on top of it, or something that you can see through it, and a place for you to eat your meals in at minimum, maybe even sleep in if you're adventurous. We shouldn't have too much rain, so we could sleep outside, I guess. But the whole point would be is it's a place for you to go outside and connect to the physical existence and with nature. Yes, sir.
It's kind of like, I'll just say, preachers and religious leaders. They're so busy trying to help others that they lose their own personal relation with God.
Correct.
And the Sukkot kind of forces you to get to that spiritual
Correct.
level.
Correct.
I don't know how many people out there, they're doing this for God,
Right.
but their own personal relationship is lacking.
Right. So it takes you out of your normal physical environment and puts you in nature with God. A dear friend of mine and my wife, and I think Loretta remember, Martin Liebesbeck, used to always tell me that he was closest with God when he was in Hawaii on the surf. He loved to surf. Loved to surf, was a great surfer. And he would say, I'm closer to God when I'm on the surf. And in reality, he's probably right. Right? Because he's out there in nature, he's connecting to this force. And he says, I just feel so connected to God out there. And so, you know, we all kind of think, well, that just seems so childish and simple. But really, what God is looking for is not you to be profound,
Right.
but to have simple trust, emunah.
Doesn't have to be complicated.
Doesn't have to be complicated, really. I mean, when it all boils down to it, we have, you know, the Rosh Hashanah, you have Yom Kippur, you have the wearing of certain clothes, you have certain prayers that are complex prayers. But bottom line, when it's all said and done, He just wants you to hang out with Him. I mean, you know, we talk about the complexities of Passover and making sure that the plate has certain items on it, and the bitter herbs, and everything needs to be dipped at a certain time in certain prayers, and when you pray a certain way during Yom Kippur, you daven, you bow, you step, you do all of these things. But bottom line, it comes down to it. Hashem wants you to just hang with Him. Now we can think of all the most amazing things that we like about our relationship with our children. And most of our children are all gone and have left the house. But what I look forward to the most with my kids is what? Just kind of hanging out, spending time together, wanting sort of undivided attention. Now, some of you people might have kids that you don't like hanging out with. I don't know, but some of us do. Just to go hang out with your kids, just be with them. And so, ultimately, let's understand the physical nature of Sukkot. Having the 4 different species of plant. Can someone tell me what the 4 species are? Does anybody know?
Barley, wheat.
Nope.
No.
Citrog.
Citrog, like a
Sinetro,
willow, myrtle branch,
willow branch, and palm.
and palm.
And they call it the lulav. It's a
The
palm branch,
yeah.
Because palm branch is the tallest of the 3 branches
Mhm.
that are bundled together as one.
Very good. And every day it's taken and waved in the different directions of the point of the compass, basically. And there are prayers and celebration that goes along with the waving of that. Why wave it? Do we know?
To show that God is all around.
Very good. So we're demonstrating this great, appreciation and great adulation that we are dwelling in the presence of God, and He is all around us, and we are in Him. And what a great analogy that is. And so many of you will.
It's not just the compass points, but you go above and below.
Above and
You
below,
follow the
correct.
lulav this way and upward, and to show that God's both in heaven and down on earth.
Correct.
And north, south, north, south, east, and west,
Mhm.
and top and bottom.
Correct.
Because even though you might shake it diagonally, it doesn't encompass the
Right.
middle.
And this is the reason why many people end up moving into observant communities, because everybody's doing it and everybody has sukkahs behind their house, and if you go visit somebody you'll end up eating their sukkah with them. And so actually Wednesday we're going to show the movie Utspitzi, and it's going to be a great movie. You got to watch it, so be here Wednesday night at 7. It's done by an Orthodox rabbi and his wife. They're actually a couple in the movie, and it's about Sukkot. So you guys will really love it. It'll help you understand the whole sort of Orthodox perspective. Huh?
Ushpizim,
Ushpizim.
if anybody wants to read about it,
Mhm.
means visitors.
Yes, visitors. Yeah, and it's actually got a very humorous approach. So it's about having this high idea about what Sukkot is supposed to be, and then when the visitors that come were not people that you want to come visit your house, it really is a very good movie. We watch it every year at this time, so it'll be fun. Let's talk about why does the sukkah have to have an opening at the top?
To look at the stars, to contemplate.
That's one, yeah, to contemplate God. There's nothing, no barrier between you and God. You have to trust on Him and the elements, right, to protect you, right? Why 3 sides and not 4 sides?
Temporary.
Temporary. Very good. Do you realize that you are a temporary structure? We're all temporary. We're 3-dimensional. Right? We're temporary. It's only going to last.
You can use the side of the wall of the building, but
Okay.
you can't use a wall like that corner, because there are 2 sides.
Right.
It has to be, you can use one wall, like this is the wall, then you can build around it. And then
Or
have
you
a
can
corner.
take like the back of your fence and build off of that as well. Yeah. So let me see if I've got a couple more notes. Temporary. The whole idea of it being a temporary deal, we understand that. The 4 kinds. We talked about it 7 days. Oh, also there's a nightly water drawing that takes place. You draw water, and it represents the preparation for the the temple service. And there's a nightly ritual of drawing water. Of course, if you lived in the country, you drew water every night before you went to bed. So the whole idea is you're living completely different. In a modern world, Rabbi Sutton will hopefully deal with this subject when he comes here. But in the book called Spiritual Technology, the idea is that since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, mankind has found ways of developing tools that extend themselves, their hands, their arms, their legs, right? Vehicles to ride in, their body. Now, in a technological age, we've learned ways to extend our mind, right? Project ourselves to the other side of the world. I was just talking today with someone who was saying, look, you can outsource some of the work that you do to a company that he works with, I don't know, in the Philippines. So you just call them and tell them, and they do what you want, and they send the work back to you, all digitally. You meet with them over the internet. It's done, right? It's just an amazing world that we live in. The problem is this, is that mankind, and this is the work of Hasatan, and I want to go back to the garden in this whole process to wrap it up. But the whole purpose of the Satan, his whole mission has been to provide an adequate misdirection for people so that they can make a choice. That's the whole idea. And he has no power within himself. He has no supernatural abilities, no supernatural powers, even though he is a spiritual being, or it is a spiritual being. His power comes from that which you relinquish to him in your negative behavior, right? The world, we say the world is becoming a darker place. Why is that? It's because there's more people, and because there's more people, there's more violence, there's more injustice in the world, and therefore Hasatan is becoming more powerful. But it is the end of age in which, as we get closer to Hashem, and as we get closer to the final redemption, the technological age is going to attempt, and this is what darkness is attempting to do right now, and I love technology, so I'm not being anti-technology. But what I'm saying is that it is the purpose of darkness to provide a suitable replacement for the neshama and our connection with God. If you can have a connection with knowledge in the internet, why do you need God?
Yeah.
If I can find a suitable connection for something within myself, then who needs God? When I can get on a few mouse clicks and I can find answers to every one of my psychiatric, psychological, emotional, financial, family needs, right there on the internet. It is like having God in a box. Unfortunately, we all know the difference, and we're not crazy here. We know the difference. But you and I both know that the ultimate outcome is to completely outsource God. That's what Hasatan's business was from the very beginning. What was the first things that he said to Eve? Did God really say that? Right. His whole job is to try to outsource God. He wants you to think that you can actually replace your relationship with Hashem. That's his whole job. He knows better. He knows you can't do it. But he wants you to be convinced that you can somehow outsource your need for God. Outsource your dependence for God. Outsource the fact that you don't really need to dwell with him. I mean, come on. The whole dwelling, think about how archaic it is to go out in your backyard. You live in a modern era. You have air conditioning. You have a television. Why would you go sleep on your back patio with a cover? If it rains, you're going to get wet. Silly. Connection to God. Oh, you think you get connected to God through going outside and breathing the air from Humble, Texas? Really? Think about how silly that sounds. And in a modern society, they think if I want to connect with God, I get on the internet and I just connect to the God that I can imagine. Right? It's become the suitable replacement. Satan did not lie to Eve. He merely misdirected Eve. Did you notice that? He didn't lie to her. He told her exactly what was going to happen. He just said, hey, you ought to think of it option B. Right? He had the two cups, and selection A and selection B, and it's like, take a sip. You need more than one soda here. You need, I know God says He has the real thing, but you need to try Pepsi or, I don't know, Dr. Pepper. Given the second option. But the most amazing thing is happening in the world today. There are people that are not Jewish that are practicing and attempting to understand Sukkot. Another call from a dear friend of mine, yes, this morning, stirred up because he's like, I am so confused now. I'm trying to deal with being a Christian pastor and deal with Torah. I don't even know how the two mix. And I said, well, the problem is you got to quit plowing the field of the knowledge of God with an ox and a jackass. If you quit doing it, it becomes very simple. You need to choose. Choose what you'll have. Both of them will do the job, but not together. Does that make sense? Both will do the job, but why would you want to do them together? Pick one that does the most efficient job for you and go with it. Because ultimately this is not about people needing to become Jewish.
Right.
This is about people connecting with God. The only problem is when you attach yourself to Torah, and when you attach yourself as a Jewish soul, you can have only one God. You can't have 2 or 3 of them, 4 or 5 of them hanging around the house. You can only have one God. And God communicates through His methods, not the methods that you choose. Right? So it's a level of dwelling and ownership unlike other people may have to do in their life. But that is our responsibility. It's about finally realizing that there is truly one God of the universe who desires to Sukkot, dwell with you and I. That's what it's about. Adam had the best sukkah in the world. Right? He had the open skies. Nature was his walls. It's incredible. He knew the end from the beginning. He knew everything. He understood all the things of the universe, could traverse from one place in the universe to the other. He had no limitations because he was a being created in the image of Hashem. It is only after he fell that he was given the limitation of skin and a body. Go back and read it for yourself. It says, and Hashem gave them skin. He had the ultimate place. So what has been the purpose of God from the beginning, and why do we find ourselves here in the 21st century talking about Sukkot and talking about Sukkot, talking about 4 different kinds of species, and talking about dwelling? Because it has been the design of the Creator from the very beginning to bring about the 7th day, to bring about the Shekinah of God dwelling upon the earth. And I've said this before, if Adam would have rectified the things his wife had done by teaching her properly, and if he would have not taken that fruit, and he would have brought redemption for her, he would have brought the holy high Sabbath, the eternal Sabbath. It would have happened. There wouldn't have been the death of Abel. There wouldn't have been the need for a flood. There wouldn't be Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because it all would have happened.
There wouldn't have been Jesus.
Wouldn't have been nothing. It would have all happened. Right? So we find ourselves up at the time of of Mount Sinai, in which it's now, hey, it's Sukkot. They're dwelling in the tent at the foot of Sinai. Now it's not just a man and a woman, but it's a whole nation. A whole nation. Out of all of the nations, Hashem goes to all the nations and says, here's my Torah, what do you think? And they all go, not my game. You tell us what's in it, then we'll sign up for it. He goes to the Jewish people, the people of Abraham, and they say, we'll do it. We don't know what's in it, but we'll do it.
Sounds like a well.
It sounds like we've done. Okay, sounds like American voters. Anyway, so people just sign up for it, and they do it. They are sitting at the foot of the mountain. Moshe goes up to get the rules and laws and regulations, the Torah, the knowledge of Hashem. Smoke, fire, and what do? They find an alternative. Hashem is up there with Moshe, and Hasatan says, you need a legitimate choice. I mean, what's the world without choice? Can you imagine only having one type of food to eat? You need choice. So he gives them a choice, and what do they say? Well, Moshe's not coming down, and it makes sense. You know, we love God with our whole heart, so let's build a golden calf and just worship God through the golden calf. Makes sense. It's an alternative.
It's a way we know how.
Right. So here what says the alternative, you can almost hear the evil one say, did God actually say not to make a golden cow? They're like, no, not yet. I haven't said anything about a golden calf. Right? So what happens is the seventh day didn't take place then, because if they wouldn't have built the golden calf and the commandments would have come down and they would have accepted it, all of a sudden the very Shekinah of God would not have just rested upon the mercy seat. It would have come down and kissed the face of the earth. Mashiach would have come and the seventh day would have begun. The great high Sabbath. But instead, we're now sitting here. The heels of Mashiach. All around us is turmoil. And the nations, people within the nations, are all hearing the call of Torah. Now it's not just one nation. It's not just the Jewish people. It's black, white, Hispanic, Asian, Chinese. Now in China, it's an amazing number of Chinese people that are wanting to study the Torah. Rabbis are traveling to China to teach them Torah. Whole communities of people in Nigeria are coming to Torah and converting to Judaism. What's happening? Is it because Judaism is on this campaign to win every soul for Torah? No, of course not. It's because Hashem is doing a work, because He stands on the mountain of Sinai in the heavenlies. You know there's an equal of everything in the heavenlies, right? He stands on the mountain of the heavenlies. And He's calling Moses up. You hear what I'm saying? He's resurrecting the very soul of Moshe in the nations. And so you think it's just because you became curious about Judaism. Or you think it's because you become curious about Hebrew letters and words. Or you think it's just because you become curious about the Torah, the Tanakh. No. You just saw Moshe walk up in your life. And you're still just like the children of Israel. You're still like Adam and Eve. You're still googly-eyed. You're not sure what's happening in the world. But I want you to know, the great Sabbath is coming. We've just got to hang on. We need to do well. We need to be a community of people that support each other. We need to have unconditional acceptance and love for all people. And be lamplighters. Be incredible lamplighters in the world that we live. This ends the session for the class today. And so we want to tell those who are listening on the live stream, shalom.
Shalom.